Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Cinephile. This week we finish our Indiana Jones series by talking about Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull from 2008. Nobody wants to talk about this movie, so we're going to talk about it for you. Jake, when was the last time you saw Crystal Skull before its rewatch?
Um, it's been a long time. It's been at least 10 years, I would say, since I've seen Crystal Skull. It is definitely the the least rewatched one. I might even watch Temple of Doom more than I watched this one. And if we remember from the Temple of Doom episode, I don't watch that one all that much either. Um, but I'm glad we rewatched it because I I don't know if I have changed opinions about it per se. Um, let me start by saying I didn't like it for the longest time. Like, and that is the
Yeah,
popular opinion among many
that is,
people. It's
yes.
like it's disappointing, and I think now I'm watching it being, I think the last time I watched this, I was probably in high school, if not, longer ago. So I feel like now I've learned more about film, so I can like articulate why I don't like it
Mhm.
better. Um, and I'm looking forward to this conversation because I want to talk about things, and I've also I think come to appreciate like just because it is not top tier Indiana Jones doesn't mean it's as bad as I think it is. If that makes sense. It's almost like you should put it this way: my frozen heart may be melting a little bit on this movie.
You know what? I'm the same way. I'm the same way. The first time I saw this was in theaters. I went with my dad. This is one of the last movies I can remember going and seeing with just him. And so it always holds a special place for that reason. But rewatching it this time, because I don't remember the last time I rewatched it all the way through. Um, maybe 5 years ago. Um, but it's definitely the one I watched the least, that's for certain.
No,
And you're right, like it's not top tier, right? It's clearly at the bottom.
yeah,
Um, but not because of Harrison Ford.
correct. Because he makes everything better, not worse.
He like he's so good as Indiana Jones. Even in a bad Indiana Jones movie, he's good.
I
Um,
I enjoyed rewatching this because you know how you can watch movies and you can tell they have fun making it. I could tell he had fun putting that hat back on and the coat and getting the whip back out. I could tell he had fun.
yes. And I mean this movie was directed by Steven Spielberg. They had talked for years about trying to get a new Indiana Jones movie off the ground after 1989. Um, and Harrison Ford was always down to do another one. Spielberg wanted to do another one, but Spielberg had to agree with George Lucas on the story and where the character was going. So they all had to agree before they would shoot it. And so it was just in this production limbo for over a decade of people coming in, writing a script, not liking it. But the one thing that George Lucas knew is that he wanted to put aliens in it.
Of course, George
And
Lucas wanted to put aliens in it, which like
well,
honestly makes sense, knowing
yes,
George
and
Lucas at the time.
and if we understand what this movie what Indiana Jones is to George Lucas, we understand why he would want to do that. Because looking at these action serials from the 40s, like the 30s and 40s, that's what the first three films were. But they've obviously aged Indy up. It's in a new decade, and so they wanted to tackle the sci-fi like B movie,
Yeah.
essentially. Um, and so that's why he took that angle.
Mhm.
But even the Crystal Skull aspect of it isn't the worst part of this movie.
No, it's not.
I think, yeah, I think looking at it in pop culture, this movie is dogged on so much.
Yeah.
And there's the phrase jumping the shark, which there's also a phrase nuking the fridge, and it comes from this movie. Quite literally because he got into a lead-lined fridge and survived a nuclear blast. Which I don't think is possible.
I think it, in theory, I think it
Dude would have
was.
been cooked. I mean, he was in a box. Like, and with how hot I'm sure the nuclear blast would
If you,
get.
I don't know if it was Mythbusters. I think someone tried, like, like, obviously they didn't put someone in a lead line fridge and light off a nuke. Like, obviously that
Right.
didn't happen, but I think there have been, someone has to have tried an experiment about this. And I think the consensus was, if it was the right amount of lead and it was the right distance away and it was a low enough tonnage, or yeah, tonnage of explosive, that if the nuke was weak enough, if we will, um it would be plausible. Now, how old was Harrison Ford when they made this? Like 60 some? Was he 70 yet?
He's not 70 yet.
Okay.
Well, that movie came out 15 years ago and he's
Okay.
80. So he
Yeah.
was 65.
Okay, he's no 65-year-old is gonna survive that, because okay, the radiation may not have killed you, but the impact in a lead line fridge when you hit the ground, like, that had to snap something.
Oh, for sure. This dude just rolled out
And I'm sure
and
whatever injury you sustained is not covered by Medicare. So
right. Yeah. And one we'll start with kind of some of the things that I liked and I think you probably liked as well. I liked hearing about Indy's war history.
yeah, I thought that was something that really jumped out at me in this rewatch, and it's I'm just gonna jump right in here. Sorry.
Yeah,
I
no,
got
no, please.
excited. I got excited because it was probably like the most profound thing that jumped out at me about this movie, and you get it right off the bat. Um, is really you get Indy the Patriot in this movie, because you know pre World War II is when the first three Indiana Jones take place. I mean, we're getting the globally the beginning of World War II. World War II is generally said to start in 1939. Germany invades Poland. Great Britain and France declare war on Nazi Germany, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, there's a bunch of things leading up to it involving the Nazis and fascist Italy and Imperial Japan. What am I getting to? We think of it as pre-World War II as an American audience because America has not entered the war yet, right?
Sure.
Even though Indy's fighting Nazis, it's it's not, we don't view it on a geopolitical scale, right? It's not, we don't view it as America versus the Nazis, we view it as Indy versus the Nazis. It's this personal conflict he has against the Nazis. But now Indy kind of sheds this apolitical, um, a national, if you will, um, part of his character in this movie, and he fully kind of, I mean, he even says, "I like Ike." Now
That was
he
legendary.
does it to piss off the Soviets, but also, like, I think he does like Ike. I think, and we hear about, like you brought up, we hear about his World War II service record, and it's completely badass, as it should be. But, like, I don't know. It's like Indy has a different. It's a different texture almost to his character. Is like he's stepped into. Um, he almost has grown up in a way, right?
Yeah.
You think of, like, I don't know. You think it's aged him, and he's become a more mature character, and he's aware of geopolitical things around him in the world. He's aware of the Cold War world he lives in almost. And really, it's the tribute to Harrison Ford, and in the way they've structured this character, is that we were able to layer all this stuff in without even really, saying all that much. But it's just it brings such a different flavor to Indy, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, seeing Indy at this age, which first off, when he said, when they were like, any last words, Dr. Jones, he goes, yeah, I like Ike. I so funny. So funny. But yeah, you see him as this more almost at the beginning of this, it's like his mindset isn't about the archaeology, right? Like if we look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, obviously he's trying to get the Ark from the Nazis, but he really is focused from the get-go of that movie on finding artifacts.
Mhm.
And this, yes, they say they pulled him from a dig somewhere and brought him here, but really the whole main focus of this movie is saving somebody,
Yeah.
right? It's not about getting the artifact. Like it doesn't start out there. Obviously, by the end, because
Hmm.
they talk about, oh, well, Harold Oxley and Indy were obsessed with the Crystal Skull in college,
Hmm.
but it's like I don't see the motivation necessarily other than, well, we're down here, might as well go and see where El Dorado is.
Yeah.
It's like there isn't that motivation, I feel like, for the character that we see in the first three films. But also at the same time, looking at Last Crusade, I mean, yes, he's trying to save his father, but also he's trying to get the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
But this time it's literally he's just trying to find and save and rescue Harold Oxley and Marion Ravenwood.
Yeah.
Um,
He kind of really just kind of gets swept up into, um because he is an archaeologist, and because he's been obsessed with the Crystal Skull, he's just kind of swept up into it, right? But his driving force um isn't returning the skull to Akator. You know, I
right.
that's not what drives him as a character. Survival is what drives him. Now he gets sidetracked a lot into becoming an archaeologist, which I think is really funny. I think of when they take him to the Soviet camp in the middle of the jungle, and he's kind of interpreting what Oxley's mumbling about, and he's finding the river and everything, and he's solving the riddle of where they need to take the skull, and Mutt literally has to flip the table and cause a big commotion to distract Indy enough to be like, "Hey, let's get out of here. This isn't about returning the skull. This is about getting out of here alive." And there are some other instances where it's left to Mutt that he has to kind of shake Indy out of his um, archaeologist mind and be like, "No, no, no, that's not the goal here. The goal is not dying."
Right. Let and speaking of Mutt, let's talk about Mutt a little bit.
Oh,
He is like the worst part of this movie, and it's not. And I mean, like basically everybody agrees that he's like the worst part of this movie. He's an annoying character, which is fine, but what's the point? Why was he there?
right. Um,
Like he could have gone and said, okay, well, so and so is, my mom and Harold Oxley are gone. I can't go, but can you go and find them? And then it's Indy himself. And it's like, because ever since, obviously, all of the Indiana Jones movies, he has people that kind of tag along with him, right?
mhm,
Raiders of the Lost Ark, we have Marion. Temple of Doom, we have Willie Scott and Short Round. And then Last Crusade, we have Marcus and then Henry Jones Sr.
mhm.
So that's not unusual. but it was almost like they're trying to do more the short round thing of the short round, but short. He just had no rapport really. I felt like with Mutt.
Yeah. I have a theory. Um,
Okay,
and it's based on Steven Spielberg being such an incredible filmmaker. I think that when they wrote Mutt, let me back up. I think my this is my theory that the the written script of this movie and what ended up on the screen when it comes to Mutt's character and how everyone else deals with Mutt is quite a bit different. I say
okay,
that because if I'm thinking as a screenwriter and a storyteller, as well as thinking as a Hollywood executive, Mutt seems like a character that's introduced in the story to learn. It seems like this movie is supposed to be the passing of the baton, and that Mutt's trying to be set up to become the next Indy or to become an offshoot of Indy, a continuation of Indy, however you want to describe it. He's the one that's supposed to pick up the torch, and we're going to go and keep telling these kind of stories and also keep going and making money off these type of movies. Um, Now, I think that Steven Spielberg saw what was happening in the rushes and on set and realized no one is going to buy this. And he's right because no one bought it. Like literally everyone's criticism of Mutt is that he's trying to be indie almost and he sucks at it.
yeah,
There's no swagger, there's no chemistry, there's no really even heroism, I want to say. I mean, his most heroic moment is when he swings on a vine with a bunch of monkeys to knock someone out of the car. Like that's like his most heroic moment in this whole movie. He's really just he's literally just going along and trying to stay alive the rest of the time. Um,
yeah, and he's so and there are certain like this movie's funny.
yeah,
Like this movie's funny, and he has some funny moments. Like when he pulls the beer, picks the beer, and then he turns away, and then Indy takes the beer and puts it back. Like that was like really
mm-hmm.
funny. Um, but I thought, and I thought them making, I mean, obviously, like them making him Indy's son made sense, but again, it was. I think you're right. It wasn't organic.
Yeah,
It was clear that the studio was focusing on what is the future of this franchise and including Shia LaBeouf, who at the time was part of the Transformers franchise and was a huge box office draw.
yeah.
So
He
they,
was very much a rising star in Hollywood
yeah,
at the time.
so they figured, okay, we'll do this and we'll make it happen
Yeah,
somehow. But the whole appeal of Indiana Jones is Harrison Ford.
yeah,
The reason these movies work, the reason even Crystal Skull is good at all,
yeah.
is because Harrison Ford was born to play Indiana
Exactly,
Jones.
exactly. And I
And that is
think,
his greatest role ever.
yeah, you're
I
right.
mean, just hands down. There's no
And
beating it.
I think there's one scene that perfectly sums up Mutt in Indy and any possibility of anyone else taking on the torch and becoming the next Indiana Jones. Is the scene at the church at the end when they get married, Indy and Marion, and Mutt goes to he picks up the hat that blows off the hat rack. He goes to pick up the hat and he goes to put it on, and Indy steals it from him and puts it on his head.
Yeah, when he
As
finessed him like that.
yeah, because like that scene, like it's a great way to end on for such an unsatisfying movie because it's literally saying I'm still Indy. You know what I mean? And I want to say that that's a Spielberg editorial because I feel like the natural way, like if you're going to write this as a screenplay before you go into production and be like, okay, we're going to find this great kid that's going to, pass the torch onto, and we're going to see, maybe we can run with it. We'll see what audiences think, blah, blah, blah. But even Spielberg couldn't commit to that because he saw how flat and how disjointed Mutt's character was. And I don't want to blame it all on Shia LaBeouf. I feel like that's a hard thing to live up to, rather
Mm-hmm.
Mutt's very much written as like a young Indiana that a raw, unrefined 50s teen version of Indiana
Of
Jones.
him. Yeah.
And so trying to play into that would be incredibly daunting for any actor. But Shia LaBeouf doesn't do himself any favors. And really, just at all, Shia LaBeouf doesn't do him any favors when they made this movie.
Right.
The reason he won't be in Dial of Destiny is because he, in the press tour for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, basically went out and said, like, yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, he did. He did
And
not play along.
no, he pissed off Harrison Ford, he pissed off Steven Spielberg. So there, for all you out there that's like, oh, maybe they'll bring him back for Dial of Destiny. Not happening.
Nope. Nope.
0% chance.
Yeah. No. And something else I wanted to talk a little bit about was the use of CGI
Okay.
and the look of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
This movie came out at a time where CGI, using a lot of it, was becoming more and more popular. Look at, again, Transformers, right? That whole movie is basically CGI.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have, a producer in George Lucas who freaking the prequels were like shot all in like one room,
Oh my gosh, this man made the prequels because CGI was a thing.
Hmm.
That's the whole reason he went back and made the prequels, is because he was like, oh, I want to do more Star Wars. And now I feel like filmmaking technologies caught up to the fact where I don't have to do puppets and claymation in miniatures. Like, we can fully realize my dream with a computer.
Right.
Which, kudos to George Lucas for the foresight um,
Yeah, dude's a
in that.
visionary.
But I mean, a big
I
flaw of the
think though,
prequels is how unnatural they feel because of the amount of CGI, and I think this has a similar issue.
well, and look at what the point of the movie is. Well, what is an Indiana Jones film? It's about history. It's
Mm-hmm.
about going and finding a MacGuffin and solving a riddle or a puzzle or, finding something that might have been lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of that has the connotation of the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you use a lot of CGI, and especially when you're talking 50s and aliens, which we don't have an alien spacecraft um, that we know of,
Right.
um, it- you use a lot of CGI, and that takes away from the realism.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the word that I would use for the first three Indiana Jones movies, even Temple of Doom, is verisimilitude. It has
Yeah.
verisimilitude. It's believable. This movie, from the very beginning, does not have verisimilitude.
Yeah.
One, the lighting in the first sequence is whack. I don't know what the issue is there. I don't know if you noticed that, but
Yeah.
when they pull him out of the car, at Area 51. It's clearly shot on a soundstage, but the lighting just looked off.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole beginning is just off for me.
And I think
Uh,
that because that puts a bad taste in your mouth in a
mm-hmm.
way
Yeah.
that it doesn't get better than that. I mean, and again with verisimilitude, you're telling me that you're going to get a bunch of gunpowder, throw it in the air, and the thing is so magnetic that it will suck that stuff and fly it all the way into and as almost like a compass and a directional map. It's like that Fidelity green arrow, right? And it's
Yeah.
supposed to like go straight to this this alien.
Yeah.
You're telling me that that is at all believable or possible. If it had that much magnetic force behind it, there's it would have to been locked away somewhere else. There's no
It,
way
but
they would have just like
yeah,
it. That would have killed somebody.
that's the thing. It's like they the concept is interesting of like that it's magnetic and that's how they find it. But not everything that's magnetic in that scene interacts with the alien, the magnetic alien in the same way. You know what I mean? Like it's a steel building for God's sakes.
Yeah,
And like
yeah,
everyone had a metal belt buckle. And everyone's
right.
carrying guns, but only like sometimes the guns are attracted to the thing. You know what I mean? And like,
Yeah,
like, oh, they could use the crowbars to pry the box open, but as soon as the box is open, like that wooden box is going to do something. It's like you said, this whole beginning is just it doesn't start off on a good note. And one of I think the hallmarks of good filmmaking is that you always want to start and end with your best stuff,
yeah,
especially in modern filmmaking right now when I have thousands of movies at my fingertips and there's a TV right behind me with that I've got. I can go to like 4 or 5 different streaming services right now and go watch
right,
something. I have a
right.
whole cabinet of DVDs. Like if I don't like something, I can stop. So if you're not going to lead with your best stuff, you're not going to get people to watch it. And so I think the beginning of this movie, and even just like looking at it on the like how an Indiana Jones movie like plays out, like the beginning is just not good because we don't start with that opening quest that is so quintessential Indiana Jones, right? We just jump right into, oh, we're it's the beginning of finding, our MacGuffin at the end and like our adventure, but there's no like beginning side quest, which I felt very disappointed about because if you look at all of those side quests in the first 3 movies, they set us up in a way like they set us up physically in like our environment and our setting, our space. It introduces us to important characters, but it also introduces important themes, right?
Right.
In the with Raiders, the important, we are introduced to who Indiana Jones is, and we see his incredible cunning and he's a very physical person, a very adventurous person. He's almost always in danger. That's set up, but it's also set up. It's an important, which is an important theme to remember for Indy's character in Raiders is that Bellocs always seem to be one step ahead, right? Temple of Doom, we're set up with Indy being driven by money, right? He's in the nightclub to get exchange the artifact for money. So it sets up this, inner question of why is Indy going after the stones? Is it to save the village or is it for
Right.
fortune and
There's that
glory?
inner conflict.
And then with Raiders with the Last Crusade, it sets up this conflict between Indy and his dad and wanting to win his dad's approval and win his dad's affection, and sets up their complicated relationship that drives that whole movie. So not having that, I feel like really did this movie a disservice because
Yeah,
literally all we start with is, oh, Indy's old.
right. And I mean, and there are a couple of good gags where, and Harrison Ford pulls it off where he's swinging
Yeah,
with his whip and goes, "Damn, I thought that was closer." I mean, that's really funny, but I think a little of the point of the movie is not to highlight that Indy's old and can't do everything anymore.
yeah.
That's not the point. And so when you kind of keep doing that, and then also the jokes about him being his son, like
Mm-hmm.
the one where he goes, um, you should lay off him about school. And she goes, he's your son. He goes, why didn't you put him through school? Like
Why the
that
hell
was
did you
really
let him
funny.
quit school?
Yeah.
That is
Um,
hilarious.
but it kind of got the old, hey, Junior, and like
Yeah,
all like that stuff kind of got really old.
yeah,
Um, it's hard because I feel like if this movie was written better, it would have
yeah,
been okay.
yeah,
Well, again, it's not bad, but even the Crystal Skull, I think written properly could work.
hmm,
But it's it just was too much, you know,
yeah,
and it was I just wanted it. So, and I think I'm speaking for a lot of people that are Indiana Jones fans and saying I just wanted to see Indy, even if he was old, you know, have that dignity and not be
hmm,
like a punching bag or a joke machine, or to show that he's still really smart.
yeah.
And
Um,
we
I
didn't really
think
see
we,
that.
mm,
No, well, okay. So he knew that there was like a ancient language. It's like one of those things where I don't know. Go
well,
ahead.
okay. I think Indy is very smart in this movie because um the whole reason the Soviets keep him alive after he finds where Oxley hid the skull. Because if really you would think that like, okay, they got this Indy got him the skull back, just whack Indy, like what's his purpose anymore? But they keep him alive because Oxley knows how to get there, but they need someone to interpret what he's
Right.
saying because he's saying in rhyme. In Indy, now whether it's through the influence of when he looked at the skull or what have you, he's able to using his prior knowledge, his years of experience and research, figure out what Oxley's saying and make that into a plan. He's like, okay, so we got to go down this river and we got to go through this, and he comes up with a plan. He's the one that sees all this. He's the one that comes up with it. So I think Indy's very smart. And like Indy has this like very like sage, like old wise wizard kind of vibe to him throughout this movie, which is interesting because he's always the one like giving kind of the explanation. What really comes to mind is at when they're in Oxley's cell, and they figure, or no, and maybe it's not an Oxley's cell, but it's where he comes up. He figures out that cradle in Mayan is also referred to like final resting place, as in a grave. Um, and then also at the end when they're like, wait, where was all the gold? Like there was some gold, but there wasn't that much gold. And he's like, well, the Uga had their word could also be translated for knowledge and blah blah blah. And I don't know, like I he puts it a lot more eloquently than I'm putting it right now. But it's this like wise old sage wizard kind of vibe. Um, which makes him. I think Indy is very smart, and maybe that's just me. Um,
No, when you put it that way, I hear what you're saying. I think I just wanted, I mean, if we're being honest, I just wanted Raiders again. Like I wanted that Indy.
yeah,
And obviously this isn't that Indy and it's not supposed to be that Indy,
yeah,
but you know, I wanted purpose. And I felt like this didn't have as much purpose as
yeah.
some of the other films.
You point out
Um,
you. Sorry, I
no,
keep
go
cutting you.
ahead.
You point out that you wanted it to be
Jeez.
Raiders, and I think in a way they tried to read the in a very
Yeah, you
loose
texted me
way.
that. Yeah, and I think you're right.
I I look at this and I'm like, I can see where they're like, let's try and remake Raiders. Like I don't know if okay, I don't know if they actually said that, but the way it all came about and in the finished product has a similar. I think this is the best way I can put it. if we had Indy from Raiders, this is a lot better movie. But
Okay.
we put Indy at an older age in a situation that felt unnatural.
Okay. Yeah, no. Yeah, because you're right. Like if we instead of the Ark of the Covenant, it was the Crystal Skull,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like him and he had to go and it was him and Marion again. Like just them two, uh, young. Yeah, no, this movie would have worked a lot more. As long as they don't have freaking Mac. I hate that guy sucks.
I think
Like
he's funny, but he's very flat.
he's very flat and it's they use him way too much.
It's cheap the way they've used him. Like he's
Yeah.
a double agent, he's a triple agent, he's a liar, he wants money, like
Yeah. It's like, bro, chill. Um,
and stop
yeah.
sweating. That man
He
is so
was very
wet.
sweaty.
That man
Yeah,
is so
yeah.
wet. Which I would be wet in the middle of the Amazon too, but
Yeah. I'm wet when I walk outside and it's like 80 degrees. I'm when I'm scrubbing tables at Flicks, that yeah, I like drip sweat. It's bad. It's really bad.
uh,
Yeah. So because everybody needed to know that. Okay, we've harped on Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull too much. So why don't we just go into Rosebud and Thorn? Let's get that bad taste of the bad CGI of Mac and Sweat, and just
I,
the lack of verisimilitude. Let's get all that out of our mouth,
I
and
especially
let's just talk about maybe some of the things we loved. Jake,
I,
what are your Rosebud and Thorn for this one?
especially when I get Max sweat out of my mouth. That would be disgusting. Rose.
Jonesy.
Okay, I do have
No.
to say with Mac, I love the moment when they like break free in the camp after Indy said he was gonna break his nose. If he ever gets out of that chair, he's gonna break his nose as soon as they
Mhm.
start the fight in the camp. He's just like Jonesy, and he's like, "Hi, Mac," and he breaks his nose. That was I enjoy that
Mac is
kind of
such a
writing.
freaking
Uh,
yeah.
and he earned that broken nose, 100%.
Mac should have been the salesman for ShamWow.
What?
Hey Jones, that's what he should have found in the El Dorado. It's like, hey Jonesy, look at this ShamWow. Uh, we're done. Why? It was first Febreze. We talked about Febreze. Now ShamWow. I'm
Oh
telling you, man.
mercy.
Oh
Oh,
man.
goodness. Anyways, roses. There are things I like in this. Like we've said, Harrison Ford is just so good. There's one person only that can play Indiana Jones, and it's Harrison Ford. Even though he's old and maybe the story around him hasn't put him in, I would say, the best place for his character, or the direction I wanted to see his character go in. I think that I still love Indy. I will always love Indy. Um, to give a rose to anyone else in an Indiana Jones movie besides Harrison Ford is fraud. Um, I'm also going to give a rose to Karen Allen in return as Marion Ravenwood, and I think their chemistry they pick right up where they left off.
Yeah,
It's like it's just it fits so well. They slide right back into it, but also are able to take it to a more they're able to take it to an older place. They're able
hmm
to make it feel like they have more history and bad history in those intervening years. But I don't know, it's the classic, like, Indy's the classic playboy that, like, he has, you know, a woman that he's supposed to be with. Like, it's clear that, like, she's the one and he's the one for her. But, like, he has to, like, sleep around and, like, go around and chase all these other women, but then, like, of course ends up back with the one he's truly meant to be with. But
yeah,
they do it in an organic and comforting way. So I really
I
like
agree.
Indy and Marion in this. And I'm also going to say um John Hurt's portrayal as Ox. I really like Ox. I feel like he almost becomes like the MacGuffin, like the skull is the MacGuffin, but like once we find the skull, like Ox almost becomes the MacGuffin because we have to try and figure him out because he knows where to take this.
Right.
He knows the end of our mission and has been there and almost did it himself. But we've got to figure out his scrambled egg of a brain
Yeah.
and figure out his code. Um, and I think John Hurt is able to um strike that balance really well between like, okay, he's crazy and he's silly, right? He almost, it reminds me of, and shocking, this is going to be a reference to a John Ford movie, um Hank Warden's portrayal in The Searchers. He's the guy that like is very like simple-minded and gets abducted by the Indians, and he's very zany and wild, but like also adds a very interesting flavor to the movie, and without taking it into a farcical place. Um, and so that reminded me of Ox in this. But I really like Ox. I think he's an interesting character. And I think the way that Indy and Marion interact with Ox is interesting. Like their whole like, because obviously they knew each other growing up and everything. They go way back. So I thought that was interesting. But um, Shia LaBeouf is Mutt. Um, Actually, wait, is that a thorn? That might be a thorn.
I mean, I'd say it's a thorn, but
I don't know. Like, I felt like there was promise there. It just, I don't know. We'll put a pin in that. We'll come back
okay.
to that. Mac, I think he's interesting, but the character is very flat. Um, I think he injects some humor into this, um, but I think he isn't used in a good way. I feel like he's very cheap.
Yeah.
Put it that way. Um, there's not a lot of thought I think that gets put into his character. And then another bud I'm going to say is Colonel Spalko, played by Cate Blanchett. I think she gives a good performance. I think the character is just a little too far out there.
Well, and also, I feel like the character's motivations aren't clear from the get-go necessarily. I mean, like, obviously, in the other films, Indy is fighting Nazis,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so he's not fighting Hitler, he's fighting Nazis. But
Mm-hmm.
in this one, he's fighting her, not really the Soviet Union, because it doesn't seem like the Soviets want this as much as she just wants this.
Right. It almost seems like she's like duped the Communist Party into like funding
Yeah.
this mission, this obsession of hers. Um, and so, like I said, I think it's a decent performance given a
Hmm.
kind of out there character. So I'm going to give her a bud on that. There's also a funny story. Apparently, Harrison Ford hadn't seen Cate Blanchett on her set without her wig till like halfway through like shooting,
Hmm.
and then he sees this blonde woman walking around, and he's like, "Who's that? What part does she play in the movie?" And they're like, "That's Cate Blanchett." And he's like,
Oh,
"The Colonel." Classic oblivious
that's
Harrison
funny.
Ford.
He
Um,
just doesn't care. Like
yeah,
he cares about playing Indy, but everything else, nah.
yeah. Then Thorns. Okay, I'm gonna say Mutt's a Thorn.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know what I was. I must have been feeling generous when I filled out my one sheet of notes and put him as a bud.
I'd say so. That dude is the biggest freaking thorn I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, even just like thinking about like Shia LaBeouf, like you even just thinking about like the way like he doesn't, the way he went around and said this movie is crap. And I'm not trying to defend this and say that the movie is not crap.
It
Because
is.
it is definitely in terms of Indiana Jones movie, this is crap.
Yeah.
Um,
It's cheeks. It's
yeah, it is still better than a lot of other movies. Don't get me wrong,
yeah. Yeah.
but in terms of Indiana Jones movie, it is crap. But it feels like he didn't he didn't appreciate it.
No, not at all.
He didn't
Not at all.
appreciate the franchise and what this has meant. to so many fans. And so I think it's in a way fitting that his character is so disjointed and unlikable, and um ultimately is deemed, be it by Spielberg and George Lucas, by the fan base, by both, is not worthy to carry on the indie legacy.
Yeah, no,
Um,
not at all. If oh, okay, over under Shia shows up at all in this movie.
oh, it it is not happening. It is not happening.
Over under 40% he's mentioned.
Oh, mentioned. Oh, mentioned. So I feel like you almost have to mention him.
I feel like that too.
And but I can also see Harrison Ford being like, that kid sucks. Take him out. I'm not looking at James Mangold, be like, that kid sucked. I'm not talking.
We're not talking about
I'm
him.
not saying his name. I don't care what George told you.
Yeah,
Um, I'm gonna bet the under on that. I'd bet the under. It's. I don't think it's happening.
yeah, they're gonna be like, just
Yeah,
forget about. I
forget
mean,
about
honestly,
him.
I could see them trying to just basically be like, forget the four happened, forget the King Crystal
Kind
Skull
of.
era,
Yeah. Kind of.
like
Um.
pulling like Terminator kind of did that with Dark
Yeah.
Fate, where they're like, forget everything after Terminator like two,
Yeah.
it didn't exist.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Um. My other bud is gonna be our story structure, pacing. I don't know what I want to call it. It's just the story just overall felt a little lacking. And I think going back to what we had said is, it makes sense to me that they were like, oh, whether consciously or subconsciously, they basically tried to make remake Raiders, and that's just a disservice to Indy as a character, because you don't have Indy at this point in life can't be the Indy from Raiders, and I feel like we didn't recognize that as the story. Um,
mm,
that's what I'm trying to say, is we didn't realize that Indy at this point in his life, we can't just make fun of him for being old, but still make him do all the things
right.
we used to have him do. And I guess like my hope is that if Crystal Skull has done any good for the Indy franchise, it is for this fifth movie to show them, hey, you have to think out, you have to push Indy into somewhere new.
Yeah,
Which really is what they is, I think, why this franchise is so successful, because in Temple of Doom and Last Crusade, we pushed Indy to somewhere new. And so I think the fact that we didn't push him to somewhere new with this story was a disservice to the character. So
that's a good point. I think for me, obviously my rose has to go to Harrison Ford as Indy. He's born to play that role. I think they're going to have a very hard time trying to reboot this property. Uh, maybe ever, because I don't. He is so charismatic and embodies the character so well that it's going to be really hard for them to find somebody else that can one. It's almost like Robin Williams and the Genie,
yeah,
but even to the nth degree, like trying to figure out how to put your own spin on a character that is basically just Harrison Ford if he knew what archaeology was. Like that's
kind of.
essentially what who Indiana Jones is. So I think it's going to be really hard for them to try and
Yeah,
reboot this if they ever do. Now he has said, and the studio has said that he is Indiana Jones. Nobody else will be Indiana Jones. That may actually be true. We'll have
it
to
might
see.
be.
It's going to be really interesting to see. But yeah, he definitely gets my rose. Um, I think my bud is verisimilitude. Like I want this movie to be more believable, but I think the CGI, the way the script is laid out, and some of the choices by some of the characters just isn't believable. And I think with a better scriptwriter, maybe it would have been,
Mhm.
but who's to say?
Yeah.
Uh, Thorn is Mutt Williams. I hate him. I hate him. Also, Mac. I didn't really buy Mac. Didn't really like that. Um, and yeah, I think overall this movie just lacks that special sauce that like I
Mhm.
don't even know the recipe to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I don't know why what is lacking, but something is lacking, as we've discussed.
I
And oh, go ahead.
I think I think movies that are as good as Indiana Jones, there is something special that is hard to define, is hard to replicate, is hard to quantify what that specialness is. It's why we watch movies.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's it's
absolutely.
why it's why we have a podcast talking about movies. It's why I
Mhm.
have a shelf full of movies. It's why, you know, theaters are open across the country. It's why they're a streaming service. We want that specialness. And even if it doesn't get achieved, I would say, you know, 60% of the time it probably doesn't get that specialness isn't fully realized. Just the chance of seeing that something special keeps people interested and keeps people wanting more and keeps people invested financially, emotionally in this industry of of motion pictures. I think this movie just lacked that something special at the
Yeah,
end of the day.
yeah, yeah, it did. It really did. Now is the time where we discuss who we think each other are. Jake, I'm going to pass it over to you. Who do you think I am?
So, at the beginning of this movie, when we see the brief scene of Indy being a professor again, um, we have Jim Broadbent playing Dean
Legend.
Charlie Stanforth. Um, that
You mean
character is
Professor Horace Slughorn?
yes. That really pissed me off because I love Jim Broadbent. I think he's a phenomenal actor.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I feel like that character was so clearly meant to be Marcus, except
Yeah.
that Denholm Elliott had
Died.
passed, and so
Yeah.
they couldn't have Marcus reappear. You have him mentioned, and it's funny that the statue that the Soviets run into in the car chase across the college campus, Marcus's head falls off of the statue and falls in their lap. So I enjoyed that bit. Um, but clearly, um, Charlie Stanforth is supposed to be Marcus,
Yeah.
in all but name. It's so cheap, it made me upset. But all that aside, I have said for two movies that I thought you were Marcus, so of course I had to say that you are Dean Stanforth. Um,
I'm glad I'm the cheap version of Marcus Brody.
I
That's
if Marcus would have been in this, you would have been Marcus all the way. Um, I think all the way you are Marcus Brody, almost to a T. Um,
Marcus Brody legend.
yes.
Yes.
Uh, but no, the academic wit is there. Um, but also you see in what little screen time he's given, um, Charlie Stanforth is a loyal friend to Indy. Um, he gives up his job so that Indy basically does not go to jail,
Right.
and is still paid full salary even if he is not teaching and will never teach again. Um, so I think you are quite a loyal friend. So there's
Thank you.
that
I
too.
appreciate that.
Hopefully that makes you feel a little better after I just said your character was the cheap version of Marcus Brody.
Yes, yes, yes. You're like, you know that Costco brand, Marcus Brody? You're that guy,
Well,
but
he's not the Costco brand. He is the Walmart brand.
he is Walmart. He's
And
yeah. Kirkland brand.
it's such a disservice to Jim Broadbent because, like I said, I think he's a phenomenal actor. I wonder if there are scenes he was in that were cut
Oh, yeah.
because I can't imagine one that Jim Broadbent would have said yes, and two that they would have paid the Mutt because I'm sure he didn't come cheap.
Right.
Um, actor of his status. So for that little screen time, if it was truly meant to be that, I'd be surprised if they paid that much and he agreed to play it.
Okay, I have a question first.
Okay.
In Stagecoach from 1939, who's the doctor?
Um. Oh.
Who's that
It's
actor's name?
crap. It's uh-huh. I can see his face. Google machine. Thomas Mitchell.
Thomas Mitchell.
God,
Is that the actor's name or the character's name?
that's the actor's name.
Okay, well, Thomas Mitchell in many movies kind of played the same weird doctor character.
Yes.
And I'm gonna say you're a Harold Oxley because he reminds me of him.
Okay.
And I know how much you like John Wayne, and John Wayne's like first big role was Stagecoach from 1939. So folks, this is how my brain works. It goes A B X Y L 7 backwards Q. Uh, like that's kind of how my brain works. But like when I was thinking about it, like this guy's so aloof that he reminds me of Thomas Mitchell, and Thomas Mitchell reminds me of Stagecoach, and Jake likes John Wayne, and John Wayne's first big movie was Stagecoach. So there we go. That was really roundabout, but that was what I was thinking.
Nice job pulling that one out of your ass.
What? It's not no.
Uh-huh, sure.
No, I like legitimately.
Okay.
I was like, this dude is so wacko that literally is why. I don't know why. I don't know. That's how my brain works.
Okay.
Anyway, now it's time to talk a little final thoughts. Jake, okay, we've talked a lot of things today. Is this a good movie?
If you look at this just as a movie, I think it's a decent movie. Um, I think as an Indiana Jones movie, it's not a good movie. Um, just there's no other way to put it. It's not a good movie. Um, yeah,
Yeah. This I don't think this is a good movie either. Indiana Jones movie. I even struggle because the CG is so noticeable.
yeah,
It's just very uninspired.
yeah,
Like Steven Spielberg did it because he's done all the other ones. I mean, obviously Harrison Ford, that's a little different, but it just is so uninspired that I struggle to say, hey, this is a movie you need to watch.
yeah,
Now, granted, there are always those movies that suck that are in a franchise that you're like, well, I have to have all the movies in the franchise.
yeah,
AKA Mission Impossible 2. Not a good movie. Not a good Mission Impossible movie, but you have to have it as a part of the set. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So for me, if you've made it this far in the pod and you haven't seen Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I almost have to say wait until after we do our Dial of Destiny review if it's important. Because if it's not important, you don't need to see it.
No,
Like that's like legitimately what I'm thinking. And this is the same guy that like struggles with telling people, okay, you need to watch the sequel trilogy at least once
yeah,
to get the full story, but never again watch it.
yeah,
Even though the sequel trilogy, the only time I will watch a sequel trilogy again is when we cover it for this podcast.
probably.
I
Um,
own two of the three of them.
I own all three.
Um, but I will, and I need to get Last Jedi to have all nine.
Yeah,
But
it feels right.
it just feels right. Yeah. Uh, I will not. I won't watch
No.
watch them until then. So that's also letting you know our Dial of Destiny review will be coming out within the week. Because this drops. I Again, we're gonna pull this one again. Tonight, I get to see Dial of Destiny for the first time.
Yes. I'm
Tonight, not as
jealous.
in tonight, because we're going to see No Hard Feelings tonight.
Yes.
Tonight, as in when you're watching this, if you watch it within the first 5 minutes, first 5 hours, first day, it is that night. And if I don't get to see it on Wednesday night, I'm gonna be so freaking pissed. I I work at I work at Flix Brew House, and so I am in movie theaters all day, every day. The amount of times, every single time I see the Dial of Destiny trailer, I get chills. I literally get hair sticking up every time. I've seen it 50 times. Every time. I still, everybody knows there that I'm super excited for this movie and super confused on why it has like a 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, because like half of the critics are like, it's amazing, and the other half are like, it's terrible. And there's like no middle ground.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand how I'm ranting. But if I don't get to see this movie, the moment the hard drive unlocks, I'm gonna be, I'm gonna be so pissed. I want to see this movie so bad, so bad. I've been waiting for 15 years. This better be a good send off. And final thing I'm gonna say about Dial of Destiny before we review it is that the first 20 to 25 minutes is an opening sequence with a de-aged Harrison Ford, which I think is incredibly fascinating because that harkens back to Last Crusade, but also harkens to what we talked about today about them not really having an opening sequence.
Mhm.
Um, and this is a great way of saying, okay, we know what you really want, which is more Indy in his prime, and we can't give that to you because he's 80. So here is like this de-age thing, but the de-aging looks spectacular.
Which
So
okay, I people have ragged on de-aging, and we saw it in The Irishman. We saw it in various forms.
right.
I guess you could say that like it, it's a similar concept to what they did for Princess Leia in Rogue One. Uh this I think the trailer looks really good. I agree with you. I think it looks the best that we've seen de-aging.
Everything we've seen of it
No.
looks really good.
And I think this just might work because basically how it works is the program uses reference footage. And between 4 Indiana Jones movies that are in the Lucasfilm catalog and 3 Star Wars movies that are in the Lucasfilm catalog, they have 7 movies that this program can pull reference from of what Harrison Ford's face looks like at roughly that age.
Well, four. I think you're thinking
Three. Okay.
three. So
Three.
we
My
have,
bad.
we have six movies.
Bruh,
We
can't
have
even
two
Crystal
different
Skull.
trilogies
Yeah.
of what his face would look like roughly at that age from different angles, from different
Mm-hmm.
lighting styles. So yeah, so I think honestly, this may be the best de-aging we may ever have seen up to this point. I don't, obviously we haven't seen the movie yet, so we
Yeah.
don't know, but it has the potential because of those factors. You're absolutely right. So we'll have to see.
Mm-hmm.
But the question really is, have you guys seen Kingdom of the Crystal Skull? If you haven't, don't until we review Dial of Destiny, because you may not need to ever see it. But if you have, did you like it? Did you not? What is your ranking with all 4 Indiana Jones films? Is it on the bottom? Of course it is. And we're not talking about bottom as in like a firm foundation. Like this isn't Christianity. This is just garbage. So we really want to hear all of your thoughts, your review down below. Let us know your thoughts. If you like this video, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, ringing that bell to get all notifications on upcoming content. Obviously, Jake and I have plenty more pods and reviews that we have down the pike. Make sure to follow us on social media. Follow us at The Cinephile. Follow myself and Jake on our personal social medias. We post stuff there. Well, I really don't post a lot on social media, but the things that I do post usually reference films. So make sure to do all of that, and make sure to tune in next week. We are covering Christopher Nolan films and the lead up to Oppenheimer later in July. So next week we are watching another 2008 film, The Dark Knight, one of the greatest comic book films of all time. I get choked up even thinking about it, as you could see. So make sure to watch that before you tune in next Wednesday when we talk about The Dark Knight. For Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next week. And cut.